Well, what do I say? What a way to start the season. It was an absolute thriller of a race which saw Valtteri Bottas take the victory, and he pretty much led all the way, and you think that that means boring race, but it was very far from that. It was an absolute thriller, and what we needed after such a long break. So, let's recap on what happened in what was a thrilling Austrian Grand Prix. There was drama even before the start of the race. I mean, I didn't mention this at the time, but whilst I was on air, it emerged that Lewis was being under-investigated for the infringement with regards to the yellow flags. And in the end, he didn't get a penalty, but the stewards decided to overturn that, and he did get a penalty in the end. Literally, I believe 40 minutes before the race start, the penalty was issued after a protest from Red Bull about the decision. So there was drama even before the start. So, let's talk about the race. The race start was, considering what was to follow, it was very straightforward, the race start. You had Bottas leading the way, Norris doing Bottas a favour by keeping Verstappen honest, which allowed Bottas to to really pull a gap. Hamilton managed to get past Albon quite quickly, and then he did quickly manage to progress. As I said, it was a very straightforward, first 9 to 10 or so laps. As you can see, Lewis got past Albon quite quickly. It was very straightforward. But then, Lando Norris dropped back behind the two Red Bulls and Lewis. But then came the first major twist in the race. The first major plot twist. When Max Verstappen who was driving kind of what he needed to do on his strategy. His car had an issue. I mean, they stated that it was an electrical issue that caused the problem, and he was forced to retire. He coasted back to the pits, and considering what went on to happen, this could have cost him the victory here today. So that was the first retirement, and there were a lot of mechanical failures. You had Daniel Ricciardo retiring from the race with gearbox troubles. And then you had Lance Stroll running out of power, forcing him out of the race. And then you had Kevin Magnussen having a brake failure, which brought out the safety car for the first time. And everyone pitted, and then there was a very close call in the pit lane when Sergio Perez, who interestingly went on to the medium tyres in comparison to the hards for the rest. Interestingly, he went on to the medium, but he almost was released into the path of Lando. Thankfully, Sergio managed to back off in time before causing a legit issue for Lando Norris. But the race got back underway. The two Mercedes were out in front ahead of Alex Albon, Lando Norris, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc in 6th, and Carlos Sainz, Sebastian Vettel. But then Sebastian Vettel, as there was a battle in front between Sainz and Leclerc, Sebastian Vettel went down the inside, made contact with Sainz and spun, and dropped to the back of the field. So the two Mercedes went out in front, but it was far from plain sailing, as apparently they were having a lot of sensor problems. They were told to avoid the curbs, and considering the other retirements that there'd been, this was a real concern. I mean, there wasn't any fighting between the two of them, because I mean it was looking like Lewis could catch up, but they were having to avoid the curves and completely change their line. And then the last thing they needed was a safety car, but that came in the form of when George Russell ground to a halt. It was really unfortunate for him, and because he was having a really good race and his car failed, and this probably, we're not quite sure what the problem was, but this probably is what concerned Mercedes even more, considering this was a Mercedes powered car. The safety car came out, but then it instantly came out again, because Kimi Räikkönen lost his wheel on the restart. I don't know how that happened. He lost his wheel on the restart and retired from the race. And then came the safety car restart. Alex Albon was looking like he could win this race. He had changed to the soft tyres and got past Perez just before the safety car. Just before the safety car happened. I mean, there was a bit of a dispute about that place, but you had Alex Albon. And it was looking like he could challenge for the win, and he went for a move around the outside of Lewis Hamilton, and he had every right to go for that move, but contact happened. It was so unfortunate. I personally thought Lewis's penalty was a bit harsh. I thought that it was simply a racing incident that both just met at the wrong place, and it was just an unlucky bit of contact. But the steward's decision went against Lewis, and he had a 5-second penalty. I mean, it can be said, I was just saying to a couple of people, what happened though did kind of spare heartbreak towards the end, because Alex Albon did actually grind to a halt with 3 laps to go with a car failure. I mean, we don't know if it was because of what happened in this incident, but if it wasn't, seeing him retire from the race, from the lead, with 3 laps to go from his first win, that would have been painful. So, if we were really spared of that, you can actually say it was kind of thankful that this happened. But, as you can see, there was a lot of battling behind. Leclerc got past Lando Norris, which turned out to be a crucial move. And then he went for a very Ricciardo-esque lunge on Sergio Perez and made that move stick. It was a very good move from Charles Leclerc, and he was up into a net second as a result of Lewis's penalty, which Lando eventually followed suit and managed to get past Perez. And then the battle was between Lando and Lewis for that last podium. Valtteri Bottas won the race ahead of Charles Leclerc. Very good result for Ferrari. A very good result for Ferrari in considering their concerns, considering the fact that the car is awful right now. But Lando Norris drove like a qualifying lap in the final lap, and he managed to get within that 5 seconds of Lewis to take his first ever podium in Formula 1, which was good to see. I mean, it always seems to happen. In the last couple, it's happened. This was kind of a lot similar to Brazil last year. You have Hamilton and Albon colliding, and their loss is both McLaren's and a driver that's never been on the podium before's gain. And this time it was Lando Norris. So Lando Norris took a well-deserved first podium. And here is the result of the race. It was Bottas, Leclerc, Norris. Hamilton's penalty dropped him to 4th. Carlos Sainz finished in 5th. A very good result for McLaren to start the season. Sergio Perez, he would be disappointed with that. I think Racing Point in general will be disappointed, considering how quick their car looks. You have Sergio Perez. He did have a penalty for speeding in the pit lane, which didn't actually affect his position because he finished more than 5 seconds ahead of Gasly. He had dropped to 6th anyway. Pierre Gasly finished in 7th, picking up points for AlphaTauri. Then you had Esteban Ocon, points on return. Antonio Giovinazzi finishes in 9th, with Sebastian Vettel finishing in 10th after his spin. Nicholas Latifi looks like he could score points in the end. And I believe that 7 out of 10 teams, all teams bar Williams, Haas, and of course Red Bull, have got points on the board for after this race. Of course, the driver's standings is going to be a direct reflection of this result. But it'll be interesting to see what it does to the constructor's standing. I'm not sure if they've been updated yet, but I will have a look. Not sure if they've actually been updated yet. Anywhere in the constructor standings for 2020. But it was a thrilling race. But it seems that the constructors haven't been updated yet. So I will talk about that in due course. But actually, I have the constructor standings up now. It is Mercedes leading the way, and McLaren are in second. I believe that's the highest that they've ever been in the constructors since like 2014. Don't forget, Lando actually got the point for fastest lap in the end. Then you have Ferrari in third, Racing Point fourth, AlphaTauri in fifth, Renault in sixth, and Alfa Romeo in seventh, with Williams, Red Bull, and Haas without any points. So that is the constructors' standings after this race. So I will be doing a team-by-team review. But for the time being, I am going to review the Formula 2 standings. The Formula 2 race. Once I've just managed to get these standings up, which I do have for F2 and about to get for F3 as well. So, the Formula 2, the sprint race took place this morning in support of the F1. And here is my recap of it. So, it was, I didn't mean to get the result up there, it was a fascinating race in Formula 2. And it was actually kind of, considering all the reliability issues that there were in Formula 2, it could be said that this was an indicator as to what was to come for the F1, as there were a lot of mechanical failures. I mean, considering it's a spec series, it was kind of that shouldn't be happening, especially in the third year of this car's use. But Felipe Drugovich had reverse grid pole, and he pulled away at the start. He had reverse grid pole, and he got the start that he needed. But it wasn't long before we had the first safety car, when Giuliano Alesi, he had quite a dramatic engine failure. He had to stop out on track, and that brought out the safety car. When the safety car came in, you had Armstrong, who was really mounting a challenge on Delatre's second place. He had made a good start, but then the safety car was out again after Luca Giotto was punted round by Jehan Deruvala and was beached in the gravel. And then Marcus Armstrong, after that, the safety car came in, Marcus Armstrong's car conked out. And he was forced to retire. And he brought out the safety car. There was a lot of battling in the midfield. As you can see, we have a lot of drivers here. You've got the likes of Pedro Piquet, Roy Nissany, both Carlins, Nikita Mazepin, Guan Yu Zhu in there. I believe that you've got also Samaya and Sato in the background battling as well. There's a lot of battling in the midfield. And then one of the biggest battles of the race was Mick Schumacher doing his utmost to get past Nobuharu Matsushita, but Matsushita was really placing his car well to be able to defend his position. But Felipe Drugovich was leading the way. He had Delatrez covered, whilst there was a battle between Aitken and Ilott, with Aitken progressing to 8th from P15. But it was Felipe Drugovich who reigned supreme, and he took his first win. I mean, who would have forecasted that? I mean, he did not show much pace in Formula 3, but as they were saying in commentary, some people get better with faster cars, and maybe Felipe Drugovich is one of those people. And he was really the surprise of the weekend. So now let's run down the result of the sprint race. It's Felipe Drugovich that won the race ahead of Louis Delatrez. Dan Ticktum finished in 3rd ahead of Robert Schwartzman in 4th. Christian Lundgaard in 5th. Nobuharu Matsushita managed to fend off Mick Schumacher to 6th. And then Jack Aitken got the final point 8th. Callum Ilott did not manage to score points, whilst Nikita Mazepin rounded out the top 10. Whilst 18 cars saw the checkered flag, with the retirements being Armstrong, Giotto, Galeo and Alesi. So, looking at the drivers' standings, I mean, in future reference, I'm going to see if I can find a way I can get them up. It's Callum Ilott that still leads the way on 27 points, ahead of Robert Schwartzman on 23. Felipe Drugovich is in 3rd after his victory. I wonder what Drugovich's trajectory is going to be this season, considering his start of the season. Dan Ticktum is in 4th. Louis Delatrez is in 5th, and Marcus Armstrong, he lost a lot of points with that retirement. He's in 6th. With Lundgaard, Alesi, Matsushita and Zhu, with his qualifying points, rounding out the top 10. There are a lot of drivers such as Zhu, Schumacher, who haven't scored the points that they're capable of yet. Obviously, Guan Yu Zhu, a very unlucky weekend for him. He had to feel for the guy after losing the win the way he did in today's race was always going to be tricky for him. But now, it's time to talk about the Formula 3 race, which also took place this morning. So, the Formula 3 race, which took place, was the first track action of the day and kicked off a very hectic day of track action. They kicked off with an action-packed race with a lot of overtaking. Everyone was very conservative in yesterday's race, but in this race there was a lot of action. Clement Novalak led the way at the start, followed by Beckman and Verschoor. It was Clement Novalak who obviously was on reverse grid pole, and he led the way at the start. Whilst David Beckman managed to get past Liam Lawson, who really had a good opening few laps. He managed to get past Liam Lawson for second. And then there was a lot of battling in the middle of the top 10, where Logan Sargent picked up a very unlucky puncture in combat. It was really unlucky. It was just the slightest of touches, but unfortunately, that in this that can be enough to puncture a tyre. David Beckman, though, was quick to pounce and take the lead from Novalak, with Lawson following suit like very soon after. And then he managed to get past David Beckman, because Liam Lawson was a man on a mission today. He managed to get past David Beckman, and then Clement Novalak managed to repass him. He really did run out of pace towards the end, did Beckman. But it was heartbreak for Alex Peroni. He had to pull off with a mechanical issue, and his car actually suddenly slowed in front of Teo Pourchaire, which resulted in Pourchaire, who was driving a good race and looking like he could score his first points of the season, to lose his front wing. It was not really anything that anyone could have done. But then Verschoor went on the move. He managed to get past Clement Novalak, and he was looking like he was going to pressure Liam Lawson. And then the safety car came out, as I believe that was Igor Fraga, or one of these Charoux cars, hit the polystyrene board, and that was put all over the track. And then the safety car was obviously needed. But on the restart, Liam Lawson led the way. But I think the thing that really helped Lawson here was not having DRS, because he pulled, whilst Verschoor did get close, without DRS it wasn't enough, and he was able to take his maiden Formula 3 win. So, looking at the result of the Formula 3 race, it was Liam Lawson who won the race ahead of Richard Verschoor in second. Clement Novalak finishes in third from first grid pole, ahead of David Beckman, who will be disappointed with that. Laurent Zendelli had a very good weekend in fifth, ahead of Frederick Vesti in sixth, the highest of the Prima cars. In seventh was Alexander Smolia, who had quite an action-packed race, and he was battling a lot. Yesterday's race winner Oscar Piastri finished in eighth. Enzo Fittipaldi drove well to get up to ninth, with Max Futrell rounding out the top 10. Jake Hughes got up to 12th behind Bent Viscal in 11th, after his weekend got ruined by his issue in race 1, whilst there were 3 retirements in the form of Jack Doohan, Alex Peroni and Cameron Dass. So, in terms of what that does to the drivers' standings, it's Oscar Piastri who leads the way on 30 points ahead of Liam Lawson on 23. Then you have Logan Sargent on 18. Alex Peroni, who is level with Frederick Vesti on 17 points. Then you have Richard Verschoor on 16. The Rims Zendelli is equal with him on 16. Then you have David Beckman on 14. And I believe my theory about him remeshing with Trident after a disappointing year last year, I believe that is my theory of that is coming true, because he's actually almost eclipsed his points total from last year as it is. After this one weekend, remains to be seen whether he maintains that. Clement Novalak is in 9th with Alexander Smolia in 10th. Whilst obviously in the constructors it is Prima that lead the way from Trident in 2nd, High Tech in 3rd, and Campos in 4th, and MP in 5th. So, now I have reviewed all the races. Now let's go into a team-by-team guide as to how I think how the race went for each team. Okay, firstly, to start with, I am going to do reverse constructors order. And in terms of the race, and I am going to start with the team that the teams that got the least points from this race, and that is obviously starting with So, here goes. It was a miserable race for them. They lacked pace and they both retired because of pretty much the same issue. They both had brake failures, and obviously neither car saw the checkered flag. So it was a very disappointing race for them. Well, what can you say? I think they thought that they could have done it this week, but of course the mechanical troubles intervened and it ruined their race. Real shame for them. They really did look like they could take the fight to Mercedes in the race, and obviously they will be very disappointed to have essentially a double retirement. So they will obviously be hoping to strike back. And this is really damaging for them because in a shorter season, one retirement can have a massive difference. Next up, this for Williams, it was a case of could have been better, but it wasn't to be. George Russell was driving really well before his car failed. Nicholas Latifi finished in 11th and was just one place off scoring a point on his debut, but it was not to be. Although, if there is a post-race penalty, like what happened in Germany, obviously he will be the one to capitalise. A kind of average race for Alfa Romeo in the circumstances. Antonio Giovinazzi got the team 2 points, finishing in 9th place, whilst Kimi Raikkonen, he would probably have scored points had his wheel not came off. The issue, I'm not sure what happened. There's obviously going to need to have some investigation into why the wheel, maybe it wasn't done tight enough, maybe it just worked. The nut just worked its way loose, but it was an okay race for them. I think they'll take 2 points. They got points on the board, Renault did, in the form of Esteban Ocon, who finished in 8th place. But Daniel Ricciardo will be disappointed to retire from the race, considering all the opportunities that would have presented themselves to him towards the closing stages of the race. So I think he's probably going to rue that. AlphaTauri, they got a 7th place from Pierre Gasly. It almost was a double points finish, but Danny Kvyat had some form of a failure at the end, some form of either a suspension or tyre failure in the closing laps, which forced him to retire with 2 laps to go. So could have been better for them. That could have put them ahead of Racing Point in the constructors. I think they expected more from this race. Sergio Perez, I think he'll be disappointed not to get the podium. Obviously, they seem to be they were outraced by the McLarens. I think maybe Sergio Perez made a bit of a mistake. The team made a bit of a mistake not to pit when the safety car came in. But he also got a 5-second speeding penalty, but it didn't really affect his position in the end because he finished in 6th on the road. Lance Stroll, he would have been disappointed. Like Ricciardo, he would have been disappointed to retire because there would have been a lot of opportunities to present themselves later in the race. I think they will be very happy with the second place that Charles Leclerc managed to get. I think that's way more than they would have even thought was possible. But it was a good result for Charles, finishing in second. Obviously, they still have a lot of work to do with the car. But in a hectic race, Charles Leclerc finished in second. Sebastian Vettel, he only managed to fight his way back up to 10th after his spin. He will be a bit disappointed with that. But Ferrari will be happy with a second place. Moving on to McLaren, they will probably be the team celebrating the most today after a really good result. 3rd and 5th. Really, they couldn't have, to be honest, I don't think they could have asked for much better in these circumstances. It was a great result. Lando Norris taking his well-deserved first podium and Carlos Sainz fighting his way to 5th towards the end of the race. So it was well deserved for both drivers. Of course, Mercedes, they won the race with Valtteri Bottas, but there were some concerning things that happened, and there was talk that it could be a concern for next week's race as well, these sensor issues that they were having. Bottas won the race. Hamilton dropped to 4th after his penalty as a result of the clash with Albon. But Mercedes, I think, will have a bit of concerns about this sensor issue going into the next race in Austria next week. In terms of... And now I am going to pick my top 3 for driver of the day. In 3rd place, I am going to put Nicholas Latifi, driving a very clean race and putting himself ready to capitalise if any of the top 10 faltered. He drove a very good race and managed to bring his car home in 11th amidst all the chaos. In 2nd place, I am going to say Alexander Albon, and of course, what can you say? He drove incredibly well to get himself into that position and even looked like he could win the race, and going for some very brave moves. For example, that move around the move that he tried around the outside of Lewis, that was very brave, and it would have been amazing if it had come off. And of course, this isn't going to be a little surprise to anyone, but my driver of the day for the Austrian Grand Prix, it has to be Lando Norris. He was just up front the whole time, and he was always looking like there was always a thought of, could he get a podium if anything happens? And sure enough, something did happen, and he did get that podium, and he managed to fight his. He managed. The lap he pulled off at the end was absolutely incredible to get that podium and capitalise from the penalty. So that has been it. I thank all of you, whether you're watching it live or watching it on repeat. I thank you all for watching this live stream, these live streams where I recap the race. And then it'll be great to have some feedback on how I can improve, because this week I was just starting out, and these I plan on improving these as the season goes on. But thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next week for the preview for the Styrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring next week. And possibly a midweek show in between as well. Thank you very much for watching. See you next week. Goodbye.